Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of the EFMD Global Fair by Hired. My name is Amber Wigmar-Alvarez, Chief Talent Officer of Hired, and it's a great pleasure to be your host for this digital conference aspect of the conference. So here we are today. We welcome Robert Perkins from Mondelez International. I'm going to tell you more about Robert, and I just wanted to let you know that you can follow us on social media. And again, we have our Instagram challenges and competitions taking place. I'll be announcing winners at the end of the session at 1 p.m. CEST from yesterday's challenge and drawing. So first of all, the topic, corporate workplace diversity. And with us, who better than Robert Perkins, who is the Chief Global Diversity and Inclusion Officer for Mondelez International, a $26 billion global snacking leader. In this position, Robert is accountable to the CHRO, to the CEO, and the board of directors, leading the organization's new diversity and inclusion strategy and helping the company fully achieve their goals. Robert has over 30 years of global expertise across a range of industries in building leadership and organizational capability and developing award-winning diversity and inclusion programs. During his 35-year career, he's held HR leadership positions in companies such as Foot Locker International, Burger King, Sony, Bertelsmann, Time Warner, Philip Morris International, Kraft Foods, Avon Products, and Procter & Gamble. A very warm welcome today, Robert Perkins, and thank you so much for joining 6 a.m. in New York City. So really appreciate it, bright and early for Robert. Now, before we get into questions that I have for Robert, I want to just take a couple of minutes to share a video on Mondelez International for those of you who are not so familiar with the organization, and then we'll be back with Robert.
We are Mondelez International, home to some of the world's favorite snacking brands. Our purpose is to empower people to snack right by offering the right snack for the right moment, made the right way. This is the purpose that guides our work, making a broader assortment of delicious, high-quality, global and local snacks that nourish life's moments and fuel our well-being. Offering a locally relevant range of snacks, from indulgent to wholesome, that are convenient, mindful, and delivered in innovative formats. Celebrating our proud heritage of makers and bakers, advancing sustainable sourcing and packaging, and obsessing over consumer-inspired quality. Together, we're making great progress to achieving our goals. We are a passionate team of 80,000 makers and bakers located all over the world. We've got everything we need. Snacking is a great market to be in. It's a growing global trend. We've got a strong footprint in more than 150 countries around the world, including an unrivaled presence in emerging markets. We're operating in fast-growing snacking categories with strong market positions. Building on these strengths, our strategy is to create value over the long term by accelerating consumer-centric growth, driving operational excellence, and building a winning growth culture. We're well set to lead the future of snacking.
Welcome, Robert. Great to have you with us today.
Good day, everyone. I hope I'm only one who's hearing the static. I don't know what's going on, but okay, there we go. Great. That was corrected. All right, well, I'm looking forward to participating today in the conference and more so answering all the students' questions and hopefully sharing some of my leadership lessons about how best for them to think about navigating their entry into corporate America. But I have to acknowledge, because I know when I was a college student, my first focus would probably be on that liquor cabinet behind Robert. So sorry I couldn't blur that out, folks. It's funny because I actually don't drink, but I know how to throw a great party. So
no problem, Robert. Completely understand. And so, first of all, what the audience needs to know about Robert is he told me he likes the challenging questions, the provocative questions. So bring them on. That's the idea. You have the chat. So feel free, ask any questions you might have for Robert in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat to field those questions to him. So just to get started, so we have Robert Perkins with us, Chief Global Diversity and Inclusion Officer at Mondelez International. Robert, you've had an illustrious career. How would you describe your professional journey?
I feel very fortunate in the sense that I've probably worked for 12 Fortune 500 companies, and I have to say I've never worked for a bad company or had a bad job experience. But one of the leadership lessons I'd actually like to share with students is my first job out of college, which I worked for the Procter and Gamble company, which was a Fortune 22 company back in 1985. And I started off working for them as a sales representative and also in distribution and manufacturing. But what I learned in that early experience is how important it is to actually find your passion, because that was not what my passion was. And although I worked for one of the greatest companies, at that time, one that all students wanted to work for, I realized that I was never going to be great at what I was doing. The company enjoyed my performance, mediocre or good, if I didn't find my passion and what really excited me. I didn't enjoy getting up and going to work every day. And I knew that that was reflected in my energy, my passion, my creativity, how hard or smart I was willing to work in my particular job. So, one of the things I would encourage students to do is really think about, where do you get your energy from, and find that passion. The money will come. Don't let money be a primary motivator for why you select a position. And I'll be quite honest, money was probably a primary motivator. I had those college loans I had to pay back, and companies weren't as focused on some of the investments that they make in students and leaders as they are today. So societies as a whole tended to go for who was paying the most versus aligning your values and job content with what would interest you and excite you the most back then. So that's my encouragement to students as you all think about that first job and making that first selection, so you don't waste any time really getting into the right career. I'll end it on this question to say, fortunately, my next opportunity put me in a position to be able to find that passion. And the one thing is, whatever job you're doing, make sure you do it well and learn as much as you can. Because the way I got into the human resources function and the passion that I have now for helping organizations build leadership and organizational capability, I leverage my experience in being in distribution and manufacturing for my next job with Avon Products, where I was an HR supervisor in a 3-shift manufacturing and distribution facility. I didn't have the HR skills, knowledge, and capabilities, but what I did have was the supply chain experience, which they valued highly and gave me the opportunity to learn the HR part of the job. So despite whether you're in a job that you enjoy or it's your passion, because many of us don't find it in our first one, still learn as much as you can in every opportunity you have throughout your career.
Great advice, Robert. And I hear you loud and clear when it comes to never take a job for the role or the title or the money. That
Yes.
quickly gets old. You talk a lot about passion, and that's one of the areas, working 20 years in the area of talent services and career services. With talent, they often get frustrated and they get stuck on finding the passion. So, for those that have maybe endeavored into a master's program or an MBA or even their undergraduate to try to find that passion, talk about how you went about finding those opportunities. And what about those that are stuck finding the passion? What are your thoughts on an array of passions and marrying those to the opportunities in the market at a given time?
Yeah, one of the things I would encourage students to do is I literally would encourage you to take out a piece of paper, write down all of your values, what's important to you, and don't think about it in the context of a job, but think about it in terms of what's important to you in life. Is important to you in life being active in your community, spending time with families and friends, having status, collaborating with others, being creative. And as you look at that list, I would encourage you to then reflect back on it and think about it in terms of a stoplight. As you look at your choices, look at your values, which ones are green, which ones do you believe can be attained or present in your future career that you're thinking about going into? Which ones are yellow? Which ones do you think are going to be difficult to be able to include in that future career and that you make? But it can be done, and then think about how would I incorporate that more into my future job, and then think about which ones are red. Think about the ones that you say, boy, there's no way I'm going to be able to incorporate this value into my future workplace. And then really reflect on those yellows and reds. How important are they for you? If the red is a non-negotiable, you may be going into a career that's never going to align with your personal values. That's going to constantly cause you to be out of sync with your passion, with being able to invest the time, energy, and effort that the company's looking for and that you're looking for as well, to be able to be your best at your particular job. So I find that that simple exercise helps bring a lot of clarity to people on whether or not they're making the right decision. Is this the right company? Is this the right leader I'm going to work for? Is this the right job? Because sometimes we can be with the right company and the right job, but we actually might not be aligned with the right leader. Their values and our values may be very different in terms of how we want to operate in the workplace. And I believe that the most important decision that anybody makes in a job selection is the person who is going to be directly supervising you. They're responsible for influencing your job content, your performance evaluations, your compensation. That relationship has to be aligned and strong. If it's not, you will never find job satisfaction in that particular job.
Absolutely. First of all, very simple yet extremely effective exercise you just recommended. And I always say what we do in the world of career is not rocket science, but it's investing the time in devising your career strategy. And career decisions are amongst the most important that we make. Robert, we spend more time in the workplace than sleeping or with family or friends. So the importance of that fit with the organization. And I love what you said about the selection process and ensuring that there's an alignment with the leader we'll be working with. So I suppose very important to ensure that part of our selection process and an interview process, we're actually having the opportunity to meet with that person who will be our direct superior.
Which is becoming, much more difficult nowadays. In the past 2 years of the pandemic, companies have, sort of been forced to have to hire people without actually meeting them. And
Mhm.
I'll tell you, I think more people have struggled with that assimilation into new companies, into new work environments, into new teams, because not being able to actually go in person and experience the work environment that you're going to be working in, meeting the people that you're going to, it's very hard making that decision through a virtual connection. And I know a lot of young people are saying, why do we need to go back into the workplace? For those of you who haven't experienced it yet, give yourself an opportunity. There's a lot of benefits to the intimacy of the relationships that you acquire and gain from in-person interaction. It just cannot be replaced in a virtual setting. There's certain nonverbal cues and energy that you'll pick up by being able to physically go into the facility and meet with the people that you're going to be working with. That's going to help you to be able to make a better decision and selection about whether or not that's the right fit for you. And, people come to me a lot of times and say, Robert, help me figure this out. Help me decide. I can help you facilitate the self discovery and self awareness, but you know what's most important to you about what you're looking for in that next job, where your strengths are and where your opportunities are, what your non negotiables are, and what has to be present and important for you to be happy. So, don't lean on other people. Don't even let other people like me, because you think we have some lifelong experience and crystal ball that we can tell you. You know much more than we do. I'll help you facilitate that conversation, but at the end of the day, you have to make that decision for yourself. I had a lot of family members and other colleagues telling me, Robert, you can't leave Procter and Gamble. That's one of the best companies in the world. And trust me, to this day, I still think Procter and Gamble is one of the best companies. I am so thankful for the investment they made in me as an early leader that I am still reaping the dividends of that investment today. but I wasn't in the right job. And I couldn't listen to other people because I probably would have still been there today, but I wouldn't have had the career success that I've had. I wouldn't have been happy. I would have been performing mediocre. And, you know, so you got to listen to that inner voice, what it's telling you about whether or not this is the right career fit for you. Nobody can really help you with that decision. Mentors like me can help guide you and help you in how you think about it, like the exercise that I proposed earlier, but you have to do the homework. You got to really do the self-reflection and really think about who are you and what is it that you want out of your career.
Excellent, wise advice there, Robert. And now we have a question from a member of the audience from Malva. Do you have any tips for college students who want a career within HR but lack the experience? I have the passion and the university degree, but it feels like most companies want experience. What do you have to say?
Yeah. So I'll broaden that then HR, because for many students, whether or not it's your entry level job, or even when you decide, wow, I'm in the wrong profession and I want to change. So what we all have to think about is, what have I done in life, or what can I do going forward that will show some transferability of skill, knowledge, and capability that's going to be valuable to that future employer. So if you don't have the sort of technical skills, think about other things. What kind of leadership skills am I maybe bringing to this organization? Where have I led organizations? Where have I led projects? Where can I show that I manage people? And it can be in a social organization, it could be in an academic organization, it could be in a volunteer organization, but you want to be able to demonstrate the other things, because technical skills are actually a small part of the job. When we hire a college student, we make an assumption that you have the basic academic background training that is necessary. We're going to actually teach you what you need to know to learn that job. You're going to learn 70% or more of what you need to be able to operate effectively actually when you get into the job. I'm sure many of you have heard this before. Regrettably, probably less than 20% of what you're learning in school will be directly applicable to whatever you decide to do in life. Now, that doesn't take away from the great college experience that you are having. It all shapes sort of, how you work with diverse people, how you problem solve. So the things that you're learning in school are transferable in an indirect way, and they're important in terms of your preparation. But the direct technical knowledge that you're going to acquire actually will be taught to you on the job in whatever profession you have. So going back to the original question, so make sure that I'm answering it. And it's a hard one, but you have to think, what do I have to offer? So go back to my example. I didn't have HR experience, but I had business acumen because I was interviewing with a company for an HR job in manufacturing and distribution where I would have been working. So my transferability, my value to them was the business acumen, and I'm bringing about transportation systems, customer service, sales ordering, the actual retail customer, and how you interact with them. So I was bringing a different value that most HR people weren't, because they didn't have that type of operational grounding and background that I did. So you have to look at what is it you can offer. And if you say, I don't have anything to offer, then think about, what do I need to do over the next 2 to 3 years to develop that offering? What are some of the transferable skills, knowledge, capabilities that I can acquire outside of being in a function that's going to make me more attractive to someone wanting to hire me and give me an opportunity? And I'll just add this other thing. If you don't know what that is, do what I call informational interviewing. Network with people, not for a job, because people come to me too often saying, Robert, can you help me get a job in Mondelez? That's not the question you should be asking. The question you should be asking is, Robert, I'm interested in going into this profession, hopefully maybe with a company like Mondelez. What is it that you look for in students that can help me think about how to best prepare so I'm attractive to your organization and you all would want to hire me? Get the information and then apply it to developing yourself so that you have it when you want to come back to a Robert or any other recruiter and actually try to get the job. I'm going to stop there because I can talk about these
Sure.
things all day, and I want to make sure we get in as
Yeah.
many questions as we possibly can.
We are so fully aligned, Robert, on all of those in terms of the transferable skills and just bringing experience even from volunteer work. It's 41% of hiring managers equally value volunteer work, community service, and your experience there as they do paid employment. So get that on there. And I love what you were saying towards the end there. And it's ask for a job and you'll get advice. Ask for advice and you'll get a job. So
Oh,
your approach when it comes to the networking. So yeah, fully aligned there, Robert. We
I'm
have
going to
another
steal
question.
that. I'm going to
Yeah,
steal that.
you got to
I
steal
love that.
that one.
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that. That's going to be
students
in my
always
future.
wake up when you say that.
Yeah.
Now, we have another question. Before I get into the specific question, I want to remind everyone we have Mondelez recruiters are standing by in the virtual stand. Robert's colleagues are standing by, especially from Western and Central Europe representation. So very specific questions about selection process and working for Mondelez. Please do visit. Stay on for Robert, but they'll be there all day. So following the session, we welcome you there. We do have a question I just want to ask you because this person is very passionate about being a part of the Mondelez family. It's slightly different. I want to get your thoughts. Hello, Robert. I'm Godwin. I've worked in cocoa bean sourcing sector for past years. And as part of my MBA management project, I'm working on digital payments and enhancing fair trade in cocoa supply chain in Ghana. Are there funding opportunities for such projects? I have a passion to be a part of the Mondelez family.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you for the project and the work that you're doing. We work extensively with the country of Ghana, as you know, but the audience may not know. Ghana is the largest producer of cocoa for companies, whose product line is in chocolate. Now, I'm getting a little bit out of my area of expertise, so if any of my colleagues from Mondelez are on here, don't talk about me. But surprisingly, I don't believe we actually have physical operations in Ghana, although we invest a lot there working with the cocoa farmers. We actually do a lot of community give back. We haven't been able to do it during the pandemic, but we have a regular annual investment where we actually take our corporate executives or just managers, leaders, and we actually try to transfer our skill, knowledge, and capability to those who are doing the operations on the ground in Ghana to help them develop their businesses and practices in the country. So I think the project that you're working on would be very interesting to us. Maybe you can what I would ask you to do is connect with me on LinkedIn so that you can forward me a little bit of the white paper and the project that you're doing. I'd also encourage you to go on to our website and read up on our ESG and different sustainability, environmental things that we're doing and try to connect in with those folks. That area of profession is a growing profession. Um, but it is one that's hard to break into, because there isn't necessarily a defined career path for how people get into those type of employments. So I'm happy to talk with you a little bit more on that offline. Please connect in with me through LinkedIn. I'll be honest, it's not my necessarily area of expertise, but as I listen to how you're framing up the work that you're doing, I have to think that if we had an opportunity, you would be attractive from that standpoint because that's very applicable experience to our business model.
Thank you so much, Robert. It's so kind of you. And now another question to continue what you were saying about advice. What do you look for in new recruits straight out of college?
Yeah. So, depending on the person that you're interviewing with, they're all going to be looking for something different. But I'll give you sort of Robert's biases. The differentiating factor, I believe, between anybody in an interview is going to be their communication impact. And what I mean by that is a lot of students and just professionals in general, they focus more so on students, particular focus on their academic achievement. Again, that's great. And for some companies, they require a certain grade point average, even to be able to interview with them. But you have to understand that pool of candidates is all still similar in terms of their academic achievement. So let's just say 10 people made the cut, and the grade point average is 3.5 or higher. All of you have it. So now what differentiates you? And it's that interview. It's how you actually show up and communicate the value that you have that differentiates you from the other 9 people. And to me, that starts with number one, leadership qualities. Companies are looking at your potential, not necessarily the job that they're hiring you for today. There's an assumption that when we hire you, we're hoping that you're going to have further career mobility and progression that's going to take you up to supervisor, manager, director. So we're looking for those things in terms of how have you collaborated with others throughout your academic experience? How have you worked effectively with people on project teams? How have you managed conflict when that's arisen on a particular team or group that you had to work with? How did you inspire and motivate people to get behind something that you were leading so that they got excited? What are the proof points on how you actually had impact and delivered against the things that you were involved in, whether or not it was internships or fraternal activities, volunteer, whatever it is? We're looking for those signs of success. We're looking for people who've had proven success, not those who just joined an organization so you could put it on your resume. A good recruiter is going to probe you and do that deep dive to see whether or not you have the substance over style that's going to differentiate, because we're only hiring one person. So what is going to differentiate me between those other 9? You have to figure out what is your competitive advantage. What are you offering to the company that you think is different or better than your peers that are bringing? And if you don't feel like you have that to offer, you still have time to work on figuring that out. And what is that? And how are you going to communicate? So communication skills are the most important thing that all of you should be working on. I interview people all the time who I know are great in terms of their technical skills, but they just fail in framing up their success and talking about that. And unfortunately, that 30, 60 minutes that I'm spending with them, that's what I have to evaluate them on. You don't get a second opportunity. You've got to nail it. Practice in front of a mirror. Practice with friends. Get feedback from others in terms of how well did you tell your story. Don't be afraid of feedback. You need to get the feedback before you get in a meeting with me. That's not the time to get the feedback with me. It's too late. There's no do-overs. So practice before you come into that conversation.
Very solid advice there, Robert. And for those of you who don't necessarily have that interview training and preparation and courses through your career services, don't forget you will have access to the Coursera platform where you can find an array of preparation and courses there in the future. So I love that, the communication impact, the way you just summarized it, and it really is the way that sets themselves apart from the rest. And it's also an area that concerns me the most with the new generation graduating now is the sometimes lack of communication skills and showcasing their strengths effectively in the interview. So definitely need to boost your employability by preparing more for those interviews. Now we have
Amber,
yes,
if I can, you just made me think of a great example that I think will resonate with the student audience. I want you all to think about a CEO or an executive leader who speaks to you today like I do. And try to envision one who gets on and reads off of a piece of paper. They're very scripted. What's your impression of that person who reads all of their notes? It's probably not that favorable. Or you have a sort of mediocre, they were okay. But the person who speaks to you, who's authentic, who's passionate, who's able to free flow in that conversation is probably going to have a better impact, and you're probably going to appreciate and enjoy that conversation much more. It's the same way. So what you're doing in your communication impact is you're establishing your credibility. How well do you know yourself? How well do you actually how grounded are you actually in that skill, knowledge, and capability that you can communicate that to me in the conversation? If you come in and you're too scripted, if you've practiced and now I ask you a question and I probe and I throw you off because you've said this is what I'm going to say and you haven't thought about what did I really do on that project? How did I manage conflict? So you tell me about the great project, but then Robert says, well, give me an example of where there was conflict on the project. And how did you manage through that conflict? If you don't know yourself well and you haven't really spent the time thinking about that, your communication effectiveness and being able to tell that story is not going to be as strong. And that's the problem. So a lot of times these CEOs, these executives, they know it, but they have such a fear that they tend to be very scripted. So they don't come across very effective. And that affects shareholders, investors, whether or not they want to get behind them and invest in their company, because they don't really feel like they believe what they're telling them about the future success of what this company can do. So sorry, I wanted to share that
No,
example.
excellent advice. It's basically taking your, we can call them smart skills, specific, measurable, attainable, and converting those into impactful CAR or STAR methodology stories to tell in your interviews. The challenge, action, result, situation, task, action, result. Fantastic. Now we have questions along the lines of types of career opportunities in Mondelez for an MBA graduate with a focus on sustainability. I would refer you to meet with the recruiters in the virtual stand for more in-depth discussions on those opportunities. A question for you, Robert, with all things being equal, is age a good factor or a setback to changing careers? So you're one who, not necessarily career change, but you've definitely had the changes within perhaps, maybe across different industries as well. But what are your thoughts on the age factor?
So let me just get a little bit of clarity on that. When we talk about age, are we talking about it more in terms of millennials? Are we talking about it more? Go ahead.
This person, 10 years experience in the financial services sector. With all things being equal, is age a good factor or a setback to changing careers? This student is now MSc in international marketing. So it looks like a master's in international marketing, but the experience in the past was in the financial services sector. And
yeah. So this is a great question, and this is going to challenge me a little bit, and this is Robert's perspective on it. So here's my thing. My perspective is different today than it probably was 10 plus years ago. And the reason being, if you go back 15, 20 years, I think experience and tenure tend to have a different weighting on consideration of a candidate's abilities and preferences from companies. Technology now has changed the acceleration of everyone's ability to be able to learn new skills, knowledge, and capabilities. So I would actually say that tenure is less important. You know, it used to be if you spent 10 years doing something, developing a deep expertise, you were more attractive to an employer. Today, that can actually maybe work against you, because sometimes the concern is going to be from companies. If you've been doing something for 10 years, have you stayed current and relevant on how your profession has actually changed? So before you react to that, the key is you have to be able to demonstrate that you're staying current and relevant in whatever your profession is. So it's not so much how long you've been doing it, but how aware are you and how advanced are you on some of the technology changes that are disrupting your company, your company's business model, or the profession that you're in. Because with this whole new impact of automation, digitization, etc., companies, a lot of the jobs that we're hiring for today, even someone with deep expertise may only have 3 to 5 years of experience, because the new skill set for these positions is so new. There's not a lot of people out there with these skills and capabilities. So the age one is very tricky. I'm reading into a little bit more of the person who asked that particular question. And I'll draw an analogy to myself because obviously I'm a boomer. I told you I started working in 1985. So a lot of people in my peer group oftentimes feel like there's age discrimination against older workers. I actually don't think there's age discrimination, but I do think there is a bias towards people who have not stayed current and relevant. I hope and I like to think that one of the reasons why I've had success in employability is because I work very hard to stay current. Unlike many of you who are probably younger who are participating in this, I didn't grow up with the same access or exposure to technology. So it's like a foreign language for me. I have to work that much harder than a younger person to stay current and relevant. That's just what I have to do because of my peer group. Look, I didn't even have a personal computer when I was in college. That was not a part of my academic experience. I didn't work with my first PC or laptop until I actually started working professionally in the work world. So I say all of that. I think it depends on if you're a boomer, Gen X, millennial, Gen Z, how that conversation looks for you. But the most important thing, regardless of generation, what have I done to stay current and relevant? Do I understand the future trends that are happening in my profession and how I need to think about that to make sure I'm positioning myself to stay as valuable in my profession as possible? I hope that helped with that question. That was a good one. That was a little tricky for me.
Yeah. No, excellent. Excellent advice, Robert. We have another one from Jack. Does a career gap from finishing your studies to finding a job really set you back in job hunting? How do I overcome the recruiter stigma? And Jack added a bit more of context. I recently finished my MBA and am now searching for a job. One of the many fears of new graduates is finding a job after graduating.
Yes. So those are really two different questions. The first one are people who like to take what I call a gap year. So this is subjective to the person that you're interviewing with. I'll tell you how Robert sort of looks at a gap year. It really depends on what did you do during that gap year? What was your purpose? Now, if you were excuse me, I know I'm a fraternity guy, so I can say what I'm about to say. If you are a frat guy and you just want to go off and have fun for the next year, which is fine if that's what you want to do and you want to party before you start corporate America, you just have to understand that when you tell that story, depending on who you're interviewing with, they may have a bias against whether or not that was the most mature decision for you to make. If that's what was important for you, you have to make that decision for yourself, but you'll never know the bias that that recruiter may have. My advice to people who are having a gap year is that you need to be able to explain that gap year. Did you do something in that gap year that helped to develop you as a person, helped to round you out? Maybe, you took some experience where you went off and you volunteered with an organization. You wanted to give back and go work in a developing country. And what you did, that's going to be much more attractive to an employer if you have a gap year. Now, some people may have a gap year because of the pandemic. Many companies weren't hiring as much over the last year or two with entry level classes, and maybe they didn't get that first opportunity coming out. So again, you want to just show that you didn't sit around and do nothing. I created a blog. I volunteered my time somewhere. Again, what we're looking at is what is the energy and passion of this person? Because if you just sat around and did nothing during this interim period where you weren't employed, that's going to make me wonder, what are you going to do when I don't have a project that's assigned to you? Will you be able to take enough initiative to be able to be creative and figure out how you can add value at work when you have some free time, you have free capacity, or you're going to wait around for Robert to always have to tell you what you need to do next? So it's a hard one to answer, but a question I would ask you is, what have you done with that gap time? How would you explain it? How would you present it to an organization, and what would be their perception of that? best way I can answer that.
And
Yep.
so Robert, with his voluntary gap year, coming from Greek life and fraternities, and I suppose there's cases like maybe Jack that there's a gap from finishing your studies to actually finding a job. But I suppose that maybe it's not voluntary. One would not want that necessarily have that gap. And I guess it's just applying that same advice. It's staying active. It's volunteer work in that period. Fantastic. So we have
Did I learn
lots
a
of
foreign language? I mean,
yes.
all kind of things. Hey, I want to be able to work internationally, so I went off and learned a foreign language so I could
Yes,
be able to work in other countries. Something. Yeah.
exactly. Now, another question from Hanin. When I graduated, I started working at a big company, but I don't feel like I'm using my skills and assets to the fullest. How do you push yourself to switch jobs as staying might be safe, but not rewarding?
Yeah, great question. I'm going to probably take that a little bit broader than what you're actually asking me. Look, there's advantages and disadvantages to big companies versus small and medium. And people have to figure out what's the best fit for them. I personally like big companies because I like the resources that are available in big companies. But one of the disadvantages to bigger companies is you're probably going to be doing a position that is much more narrower in scope of responsibility than if you work for a medium size or smaller company, where you're typically going to have a much broader portfolio of responsibilities than you would get in a bigger. So depending on how you're wired and what interests you more or what you're trying to do, if you're finding it difficult in a bigger company getting that leadership opportunity or being able to work on other projects outside of your narrow scope of responsibility, a smaller, more medium-sized company may be a better fit for you temporarily or long term, who's going to give you that opportunity for that broader scope of responsibility. But it all depends. I mean, again, there's lots of advantages and disadvantages. Bigger companies have sometimes, bigger perks and benefits and et cetera. But some smaller companies sometimes have more flexibility, and can, navigate and are more nimble in terms of their decision making and things. So it really depends on what you're looking for, how you're wired. But let me make sure I answer that question. Did I get all of it in there?
Yes, you absolutely did.
Okay.
You
All
did.
right.
Now, a
Great.
question, because you focused before on the importance of the fit and also the interview being that opportunity to ensure there's alignment with your own values with the new organization. A question about when you were interviewing for different companies, what kind of research about the company did you do beforehand?
Yeah. So I know they teach you in school to research companies. Look, you got 30 minutes or 60 minutes to talk about yourself. I wouldn't spend an inordinate amount of time. You just need to know the basics about the company that you're interviewing in. What's their business model? Where are they operated? What are the company values? Maybe read some, I mean, just go on their website and read enough about them. You don't need to have a deep, intimate knowledge. Now, this is just Rob's personal opinion. We're going to spend more time on you. We want to learn about you. I know about Mondelez. I don't need you. I don't need you to tell me about Mondelez, but I do want to know that you have some understanding of the company that you're going to work for potentially, and you've thought about why this would be a good fit for you. So what I would say is, whatever research you do on a company, how do I incorporate that into how I'm going to tell my story? So if I were interviewing as a student, one of the things I might say is, one of the things I noticed about Mondelez is it appears that you guys do a good job of really investing in the people that you hire in terms of helping them build their skills, knowledge, and capabilities. That's important to me in terms of what I'm looking for in a company. So I've built that in, and I've talked about what's important to me. So I've helped the company understand more about Robert. That's the best way. Don't do all this research hoping that Robert's going to ask me some question that I can impress him with about, what is Mondelez. You weave it in, you won't even get the question from Robert, because I'm like, wow, this guy is really, or gal, or, has really done their research. on the company. And I see it evident in the story that you're telling me.
Excellent. And so fantastic questions we have coming in. Just a reminder to our audience, we have the Mondelez International recruiters are standing by in the virtual stand ready and interested in meeting you, our talent. So continue. You can ask those specific questions to the recruiters there. Stay on with us for the remainder of Robert's session here, but then head on over to the Mondelez International stand. Now, Robert, we have you, Diversity and Inclusion Officer. I want to ask you about what was it that inspired you to be involved in efforts to advance diversity, inclusion, and representation in corporate America? What was it that got you on this path?
Yeah, this will be a little bit of an interesting story. So this is going to take me back a little bit to the early part of my career. I normally say the company that I was working for, but I'm not going to mention it. I decided I'm not going to mention it with this particular group. It's really kind of not fair. And it's not about the company. It's about what happened. So I was working for a Fortune 500 CPG company. It wasn't Procter and Gamble. And the company was just first starting, to think about diversity in the workplace. And they decided to do training workshops. And they had asked me if I would volunteer as one of the trainers to do training at a manufacturing facility of about 600 people. So this was back in the mid 90s. And at that time, companies were spending 2 or 3 days on diversity training. Nobody would probably do that today. You're lucky if they spend 2 hours. But the company was spending 2 days. I was at the end of a 2-day training session with a group of about 30 manufacturing supervisors, managers, and directors in the plant. And we were starting to do a module on sexual identity and orientation. Now, you have to remember back in the mid 90s, this was still a very volatile subject matter. And I'm facilitating and I'm talking about, generally 10% of a population tends to be LGBTQ. And one of the manufacturing supervisors said, "Robert, I just heard you throw out this statistic. Do you think that's true?" I said, "Generally, give or take, plus or minus 1 or 2. He said, "Well, if that's true, there's 600 people working here at our manufacturing plant. That would mean up to about 60 people must be gay or lesbian." I said, "Yeah, possibly." He said, "Well, if that's true, I want us to round up every one of those F and Fs, and the word ends with a TS. So most of you probably know what I'm talking about, but I'm not going to use that derogatory language here on this session." And I'm shocked and in awe. And everybody in the workshop just starts laughing. They're falling out of their seat. They're crying in laughter. They think this is hilarious. And this must have went on for about 30 seconds. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do here as the facilitator? How am I going to address this, this horrific behavior? There are probably people sitting here right now in the workshop who actually may be LGBTQ, who are feeling pressured to go along and collude with this laughter because they see how their peers and colleagues have supported this particular manufacturing supervisor. So when all the laughter finally stopped, I said to the group, I said, "Well, I guess if you all support him and you want to round up all of the gay and lesbian employees in your organization, that means that you want to round them up and you want to get rid of them like me too." All of a sudden, everybody in the session was embarrassed. They were shocked. All the laughing immediately came to a halt. Nobody knew that I was actually a gay male myself. Now they were all trying to apologize for their behavior. So I'm going to make a long story short. That's what really inspired my work. I realized at that point in time in America, we had a president who was saying, "Don't ask, don't tell." I knew that I could no longer not allow my voice to be a part of this conversation. It was, I needed to stand up and make sure that I was visible and represented. And at that moment, I did it. Now, I was always out to my family and immediate friends, but back in the mid 90s, corporate America wasn't comfortable or really encouraging people to necessarily be out about their sexual orientation. So, after the workshop, people came up to me and pulled my coattail. Thank you, Robert, for, saying what you said and coming out. I felt very uncomfortable. I didn't know how to handle it. My brother, my sister, my father, my mother, my cousin, my aunt, uncle, they're telling me all these stories. I said, yes, but you didn't show any support for me or your other colleagues at that particular time. You colluded. Think about how all those people felt. I hope next time you'll stand up and lend your voice if you really believe that was the inappropriate thing for that person to say. So that's what inspired me to do this particular work. I realized that whatever dimension of diversity we all represent, gender, race, physical abilities, sexual orientation, ethnicity, age, whatever it might be, it's important that we make sure that we're standing up for the groups that we have membership in and trying to educate people so that we create a work environment where everybody can reach their full potential.
Thank you, Robert.
That's what inspired me.
Incredible story, and for sharing your personal story. Very moving. Amazing then the career that you've gone on to have in diversity inclusion. And what advice would you have for those in the audience today, graduates, as they think about promoting diversity, inclusion, and representation in their own careers?
Yeah. I'm going to take that question because I figure we're probably getting close to running out of time, although I'm not looking at the clock. I'm going to take it a little bit of a different way, and I'll come back to the DEI, but I really want to share with students what leadership advice. There's two things I would encourage you to think about. One is the most important thing I think you have to think about is exposure and visibility. And how do you create that? If you're not on my radar screen, if you're not on companies' radar screens, if you're not on a recruiter's radar screen, I can't help you. I can't help support you. So you have to realize that for any open job, companies are probably getting 300, maybe 3,000 resumes and applicants. So you've got to figure out, how do you create the exposure and visibility to break yourself out of that pack? I once hired an intern that was networked with me through LinkedIn that I have never met in my life, and I didn't even know the person was in my network. But they kept coming up in my feed because it was a college student who was working his way through college, working a full-time job, going to school full-time, and he was the #1 sales leader in the region for the Fortune 500 company that he was working for. I was so impressed about reading these stories about him being the #1 sales leader and being able to work full-time, go to school full-time, be on the dean's list. I actually reached out to him through my LinkedIn and started a conversation, first just congratulating him and telling him how proud I was of his achievement. And then I ended up offering him an internship to come to work for me for the summer. Never met the guy before that. But it was through that exposure that he got connected with me. So technology now enables us to connect with people on a worldwide basis. I have met thousands of people in Mondelez through these virtual connections, through LinkedIn, etc. I've never met these people. I have one of my colleagues today who's ready to talk to you all that works for me in Brussels, Belgium. We have never met, so you have to figure out how to leverage technology now to your benefit. LinkedIn is a great one, but you can't just depend on that. As that gentleman, I think it was a gentleman who talked about the work that he's doing in Ghana and the cocoa farms, that's very important for Mondelez. He needs to be figuring out, how do I make sure not only Mondelez, but Hershey, Nestle, everybody in the chocolate industry knows that project that he's working on. He needs to get that out. Whether or not they're asking him or not, I would be pushing it out to whoever is in his network, just as an FYI. Here, I wanted to share with you this white paper. This might be of value for your organization. If you'd like me to come in and talk to you all more about what I did, I'd be happy to volunteer and spend some time. Think about the assets that you have that can give you that exposure and visibility. The second advice I would have for students is, you got to think about automation and what is the impact that automation and digitization is having on jobs. There are a lot of jobs that are going to start to get eliminated over the next 10 years that people are not thinking about. One I'll pick on is the banking industry. The banking industry predicts that 2/3 of the teller jobs that we all go to have a transaction will be gone by 2025. There are hundreds of thousands of people that are doing those teller jobs in banks on a worldwide basis. Have those people started thinking about what am I going to be doing when that job is eliminated? Why is that job eliminated? Because technology has changed. I don't go into a bank anymore. I do all my banking transactions over the computer. There's no need to have those jobs. You need to be thinking about what are those future trends and how is automation and digitization going to change my profession? It doesn't mean it's going to eliminate your profession, but it's going to change the way that it operates and the skills and capabilities you're going to need 3 to 5 years from now that are going to be very different from what you're doing today. Have you thought about that so that you're positioning yourself and you're acquiring the right skills and capabilities for long-term employability? Those are the two things I would encourage you to really think about to make sure that you're staying competitive. And it changes every 2, 3, 5 years. So the conversation I'm having with you today may be very different in 2025, but that's why you have to read, you have to study, you have to see where the trends are going within the industries that you're interested in and the professions that you're interested in.
Very solid advice there for those looking to promote diversity, inclusion, representation. Would that advice change in any way if we're talking to individuals of color or allies for you?
Yes, it would. One of the things that I've noticed during the pandemic is that women and persons of color are much more disadvantaged. They've actually been locked out of a lot of those normal networks that people are a part of. And sometimes we do it to ourselves because we find it more uncomfortable having to assimilate into groups that we don't believe we have membership in. So those of us who weren't a part of those networks pre-pandemic, it's much harder becoming a part of those works during the pandemic. I do think women and minorities, whether it's right or wrong, have to work a lot harder to make sure that they're a part of it. I'll share a story with you. So I was actually doing my own consulting practice prior to coming to work for Mondelez. And I was working with a company, and one of the executives of the company was bragging to me about how during the pandemic, he was getting together with a number of junior leaders to maintain some connection. And they were getting together in a park and they were social distancing. I was like, wow, that's great. I said, well, who's participating? And he started naming off the people, this male, this male, this male, this male, this male, and that male. So there were about 7 people, and they were all males getting together in the park. Now, in his company, there are 60% women who actually work for the company. I said, do you see anything wrong with the network that you've established? And his eyes got big, and he was no longer bragging because he knew where I was going to go with this conversation. And he tried to justify himself. Oh, well, Robert, I didn't intentionally exclude the women from. I said, but why aren't there any women present? Did you invite any? Well, they didn't. They just, and he got tongue tied because the network was among the guys. Those are the ones that get together. The women weren't a part of the network. So he didn't consciously think about, I should make sure some women are a part of this group who gets together in the park, because we're talking about business. We're building relationships. They're learning from me, and I'm sharing my experience and knowledge. But all the women who are not participating in that are locked out of that networking. They're not locked out of that relationship building. So we have to think about that. And sometimes we got to assert ourselves. And if we're not being invited into the networks, we got to figure out how do we get invited into those networks.
Excellent, Robert. And we are out of time. I'm going to ask you for one super quick response to a great question about the gender pay gap. Your thoughts on the gender pay gap, or in the very least, Mondelez's stance when it comes to bridging the gender pay gap?
Wow, that's a complex one, but here's my thing. So at Mondelez, we monitor pay equity. We do an annual pay equity analysis to ensure. Our latest pay equity analysis, which was done on U.S. gender, shows that there was no statistical difference between how women and men are being paid. One of the things that I'm very proud of that you'll find that's unique about Mondelez, that I do think is our competitive advantage over a lot of other companies, we have women who are working in what I call operational and P&L positions. What you'll find is oftentimes women tend to be more in the corporate functions and staff functions and not the P&L and operational positions, which really give them the skills and backgrounds to be able to prepare them for the C-suite. I'm not saying we're at the gender parity and equity that I would like for us to be at. No company is right now. But when we benchmark ourselves, we benchmark much more favorably than our peers do in this regard. So I'm very proud of the progress. We're moving northeast. We're making it. This is something that all women should be paying attention to as you're thinking about the companies that you're going to work for. Are women clustered in certain, or are women spread out and given opportunities across the different functional areas within a company?
Thank you so much, Robert. I have been just in awe over your advice. It's fantastic, solid, concrete advice, very actionable points for our students and graduates in the audience. Fantastic feedback coming in from the audience, brave and moving personal story. We thank you for sharing that, and just very valuable words from someone who's had such a successful and continues to have a successful career trajectory. So we thank you once again. I want to remind the audience, we have your colleagues are standing by in the Mondelez International virtual stand. So do connect with them there and ask. There's many questions that we have not had a chance to cover. And also, Robert was so kind to invite you to connect with him on LinkedIn. So do that if there's more specific questions for Robert. And I thank you, Robert, once again, and just for being so generous with your time and connecting so early in the day in New York City. Thank you all.
Now, this was great.
Yeah,
appreciate it. No, I was just going to say this was great. I appreciate the opportunity, and good luck to everyone. Hopefully this helps you a little bit in your preparation. Thanks,
absolutely. Thank you. And now we will be watching a short video from our sponsor, AB InBev, and immediately following, we're going to be announcing the winners from yesterday's Instagram drawing. You have another challenge today. The giveaway today will be a post on why is Coursera the future of complementary learning. So get on our Instagram @GetHired account, share there, and participate in the opportunity to have complimentary free access to Coursera courses. So let's watch a word from our sponsor, AB InBev.
Sharing a beer has brought people together for centuries. This simple act is as meaningful today as it was over 600 years ago when we first started brewing. From the very beginning, our company was built on making connections, bringing people together to make a difference. For us, that starts with brewing great beer. True masters of the craft, our brewers work closely with farmers to combine top-quality barley, the choicest hops, and our taste signature yeasts to delight beer drinkers. Every bottle is one we are proud to serve. With more than 400 brands made in over 50 countries, we brew many of the world's most loved beers and have a beer to suit every occasion. We continue to lead the way, pushing the boundaries with new tastes and experiences to provide more people with more choices in more places. But our commitment doesn't end there. We are using our resources and energy to make a positive impact on the world. We support the livelihoods of thousands of farmers and retailers. We set the bar in water efficiency and are helping improve access to clean water and reduce our impact on the environment in our communities and beyond. And we are working hard to ensure every experience with our beer is a positive one, bringing people together through our brands, our people, and our communities, today and for generations to come. We are AB InBev.
Thank you very much, AB InBev, for making our event possible. The winners are now put, so go check it out at the Hired Instagram account @GetHired, and you can find the winners there from yesterday's drawing, as well as the new challenges for you to participate in. I want to remind you that at 4 p.m. CEST today, we have CV Clinic number 2 of the day with co-host Helen Darling from Cranfield University. She is the head of employer engagement. And again, you have the chance to participate for a live express review of your CV. So the trick is to be there at the top of the hour, get there as soon as possible. We select the CVs on a first come, first serve basis for review from 4 to 5 p.m. CEST. My name is Amber Wigmer-Alvarez, Chief Talent Officer of Hired. Thank you very much.